Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you all about the latest from Warbringer, Weapons of Tomorrow, out April 24th on Napalm Records. The album has 10 tracks, 50 minutes in length, and this is the band's 6th full-length studio album. When I started listening to the album, I felt that there's no way these guys can keep an album this intense all the way through 10 tracks. It's just too much. It will sound epic, it will sound powerful, but at the same time will sound flat and linear, and all the songs will start to feel the same. And that was not the case. As I go through the album, I realized that these guys took an incredible approach to the overall structure, track listing of the album to create a very dynamic record, very fluid with a lot of different changes that really allows the listener to change the way he perceives each song and the way he perceives each portion of the album, giving you enough time to catch your breath before you get another impactful song, to get another aggressive track, and that overall creates an album that has extremely good playability. I want to start off with the overall structure of the record because I really feel for this album specifically, that is the spinal cord of the album and that is the main vessel which everything else feeds from it as far as the record is concerned. So to me, this album is divided into three parts. The first part of the record, or the first third if you will, it has a great dynamic, intense, aggressive approach. Like I said, the album starts off with Firepower Kills. That song is extremely dynamic, fluid, fast, heavy, with heavy driven riffs, and that's what you're going to get from that first third of the album. Then the middle third of the album sees a little bit of a dip in intensity. It's still aggressive, but it's aggressive from an emotional perspective, not just necessarily from the music itself. So you see a very noticeable dip, specifically in a song like Defiance of Fate, which to me is a thrash metal ballad. So you have this change in dynamic, you have this change in eyesight, this different approach, becoming a lot more somber, a lot more darker, a lot more emotional, very different from the opening. And then you have the last third of the album where you see a merger of the two previous worlds. You see a merger of that opening, that intensity, that aggression, and then also a mixture of that more somber, dark feel with a more emotional aggression built into the tracks. So very interesting approach because the way it starts, it gives you a sense of security, because for fans of Warbringer, those first three opening tracks have a sense of familiarity. So as a fan, you walk into this record feeling like you know what you're getting yourself into. This is something familiar to your ears. This is what you were expecting from Warbringer. Then as it dips towards the middle, you really welcome that because you need something to allow you to just take a breath. So you welcome that feeling. And then as it merges into the last third, you see a merger of these two worlds coming together, giving you a different face, a different side, a different approach from the band. But by that time, you're so engulfed in the album that you really don't notice those subtle changes. You're welcoming those subtle changes because it's merging the new with the old, if you will, and giving you a brand new fresh sound, a new brand new fresh approach. So by then your senses are not dull, but your senses are a little bit shaken, out of whack, and you're a lot more willing to entertain a different feel and a different approach to the album, perhaps not even noticing that you went through this peak, this huge valley, and now you're peaking all over again. So I really like the overall feel and structure and sound that the record has. This to me allows the album to have a great playability all the way from the first to the last song, have a great sound, really change directions, really change approaches, change the feel of the album without having the album feel disconnected, without having the tracks not feel like they belong together. And to me, that's very important. And still keeping intensity and still keeping aggression. It's just the way they package that intensity and the way they package that aggression is different from the first third to the last third. It changes, it morphs, it migrates into different places. So I applaud them for creating an album that overall has this absolute sense of destruction, this feeling of just absolutely bulldozing over everything, having so much power, so much aggression, so much intensity. But then when you look inside the record and you start looking at individual tracks, you realize that it's not always that way. It seems that way when you look at the overall picture, but when you look at the individual tracks, you start realizing how different they are from each other, the different sound, the different approach, the different structure, how the solos are put together, how the tracks are put together. And that to me is what allows this album to be as good as it is, because this album is magnificent from that perspective. Great overall sound, like I said, great playability. The guitars on this album are magnificent. Very fluid, very heavy, very powerful, really having a penetrating sound, mixing that old school thrash metal feel with a more modern approach. Very important, and they did it very well. They did it in a gradual way. They didn't just throw it at you, giving you one song with one style, giving you another song with a different style. They really morphed those two together as the album progressed. Very important. The drums also very heavy, very relentless. To me, they created this really huge wall of sound. They really encompass what the guitars were doing. The guitars were able to morph and go in different directions. The drums, in my opinion, were a lot more linear, a lot more straightforward. They were the referee that kept everything in check. They kept the vocals in check, they kept the guitars in check, and they added this, like I said, big wall of sound, this really heavy presence on every single track. Even in the ones where the intensity is not as present, where you have more of a somber feel, you have more of a dark mood to it, the drums are still playing a very important role. They're still creating an atmosphere, they're still adding some heaviness, even though it's perhaps not over the top heaviness, but they're still adding a very important elements to the overall sound of those songs, and they create a scenario, they create an atmosphere that's very important in order for those songs to work. Vocally, what can I say? Magnificent. It was just really the cherry on top. The right delivery, the right approach, the right intensity for the right tracks. When the songs asked for a more somber feel, you got that. When the songs asked for a more brutal, straightforward, no holds bar approach, you got that. To me, the vocals on this album were perfect. The perfect outlet for the aggression, for the emotion that each song had. Overall, this, in my opinion, so far in 2020, best thrash metal album that I've heard, perhaps one of the best albums of 2020. I know it's early in the year, but an album that's this well crafted, that is this well put together, that has this beauty of sound, this merging of worlds coming together from beginning to end, deserves to be, if not on top of Mount Olympus, very close to that top. This is a magnificent record from Warbringer. As far as songs are concerned, I picked 3 songs that really illustrate the difference in sound and approaches that this album has. I want to start off with Defiance of Fate, because the moment I started listening to this record, this song immediately caught my eye, it caught my attention. It's the first song of the middle third, and it's a song that has a very melancholic thrash metal ballad feel to it with a King Diamond structure. I really feel that way. It's really interesting because the way the song is put together has a little bit of a sense of King Diamond built into it, but the way it sounds, it sounds more like a thrash metal ballad. So it's a mixture of those two worlds coming together. It has a very extended instrumental intro. I really like that. The song overall has this dark, melancholic underbelly that's really magnified by the vocals. The vocals really enhance that feel, enhance that darkness, enhance that atmosphere. The guitar playing on this song is absolutely magnificent. From the riffs to the solos, the overall guitar work on this track just blew my mind. This is a long track, and they go in a lot of different directions with the guitars on this song. Easy to lose track of where you are, easy to throw too many things at you, hoping that something sticks. They didn't. They kept it complicated and simple at the very same time. Not an easy thing to do. They did it with the guitars, creating a great sounding song. In my opinion, giving really the life that this song needs, and giving the song the different momentums that it has all the way throughout. Very interesting track, a really layered track. There's a lot of different layers to this song. It's a very convoluted track, if you will. Has a lot of different momentums, has a lot of different changes, but overall still feels like a magnificent track all around. It still sounds like an incredible track. It has a lot of power, it has a lot of darkness, it has a lot of aggression, but that aggression is more emotional than necessarily coming from the sound or even from the vocals. Next, Unraveling. This is a more fast, powerful, heavy song. From the opening all the way through, has this feeling of being very relentless, comes at you in an uncompromising manner, really aggressive track. The first solo adds a little bit of this old school thrash metal to it. It's perfectly placed as well, and it's perfectly executed. It's not just how you create this solo, it's how it sounds and where you put it in the track that really gives that old school feel to it. Then there's a killer riff at the midway point that, in my opinion, really changes the dynamic of the song. This is a song that has a very interesting structure. It really morphs from almost an old school thrash metal song into something a little bit more modern, and that middle riff, in my opinion, is the bridge that connects those two worlds together. It slows a little bit more in intensity in the second half of the song. It becomes heavy but more somber at the same time. It becomes really a hybrid of aggression, heaviness, and melancholy. It's a song that really mixes all these pieces together, and it's a song that you feel that it's moving, and as it's moving, it's morphing into something different. And to me, that middle guitar bridge is really the noticeable point, is really the transfer, the bridge point between the first half and the second half of the song. Next, Power, Unsurpassed, one of the more traditional Warbringer tracks. It really had all the traditional elements that you've come to expect from this band, and to me this song is really a throwback song to songs that they've done in previous records. I felt that it was the one perhaps of these three where they tweaked with it the least. They really didn't add too many flares to it. They didn't really add too many things to it. They didn't try to be too fancy with it. They perhaps stayed a little bit closer to home with this track. Has great sound, great riffs, great tempo, blistering vocals that just allow the song to have this forward motion to it, getting a bit more of a bite in the chorus as far as the guitars are concerned. I really felt that they got a little bit heavier, they got a little bit more aggressive in the chorus compared to the verses. The layers of the vocals almost create a little bit of an homage to Annihilator, old school 1980s Annihilator. I felt a little bit of Alice in Hell in certain parts of the vocals in terms of how they were layered, how they were put together. It kind of made me reminisce of that song. It made me reminisce of Annihilator, so I really like what they did there. Almost a tip of the hat to one of the thrash metal classics of the 80s, and all-time classic. So I really like what they did with that portion of the song. The solo is magnificent, creates a great transition. The solo moves forward and it stays in the background as the vocals come on top of it. The vocals really, the solo is really long. It really feels like it's an extended solo. When you look deep into the track, at first glance it doesn't feel that way because things start to get added on top of the solo that kind of cover the solo a little bit and don't let the solo breathe as much. But it works really well because it works with the overall atmosphere of the song. It works with the overall feel that the track has, and I really like that sense of giving you a solo, extending it, but then covering it with other elements like the drums and vocals. Something to almost allow the solo to become something that's playing in the background, adding melody to the overall track. I really like that. Another great element of this song is the bass. Really comes through in this track, perhaps more than some others, but if there's one thing that you're going to notice throughout the album is that they didn't really skip on the bass. They use it when they need to, and they let it come to the forefront when it needs to be in the forefront. In this song, you get a little bit of that bass coming out of the shadows, more into the limelight, and give you a little bit of flavor, a little bit of grooviness, and then moves into a part of the song, the ending of the song, that's very destructive. The closing is heavy, is melodic. There's another solo playing in the background, really creating a very perfect unison feel to the way the track closes. Very aggressive, a lot of sound, this big wall of sound coming together to finish off this track. Alright guys, this is it. This is Warbringer with Weapons of Tomorrow. Like I said, a magnificent album. If you guys are fans of thrash metal, you have to pick up this album. You're not going to regret it. As far as thrash is concerned, this is going to be perhaps the #1 album of the year. At least for me, so far, is the #1 album of the year within that genre. But overall, like I said, if it's not at the top of Mount Olympus, this album is going to be very close to that top. So go out there, check it out. Warbringer, Weapons of Tomorrow, once again out April 24th on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those, getting back to you. Take care, guys.